Sometimes you'll be flying in the company of much larger aircraft. It's important to know how these aircraft might affect you. First, let's look at a boat going through the water. Now notice the wake that it's generating. Well, an airplane also generates a wake in the air. We call that wake turbulence or wingtip vortices. Wingtip vortices occur because anytime an airplane is flying, there's a high pressure underneath the wing and a low pressure area on top of the wing. So the air from underneath the wing tries to make its way around the wingtip and join that low pressure area on top of the wing. The problem is that by the time these molecules make their way around the wingtip, the wing is gone. It isn't there anymore. So what you really get are these wingtip vortices following the aircraft like horizontal tornadoes. Anytime an aircraft is producing lift, you'll have these wingtip vortices. And they are strongest when the airplane is at high angles of attack at the wingtips, namely when the airplane is heavy or slow. How about when the flaps are up or down? Well, when the flaps are going down, you need to pitch the nose of the airplane down just a little bit to keep from climbing, and the angle of attack at the wingtips is less. But when you raise the flaps, you need to raise the nose of the airplane to keep from descending, and the angle of attack at the wingtips is higher. So when do you have the greatest wake turbulence behind an airplane? Well, when the airplane is heavy, clean, and slow. Now, these vortices are a danger to you when you are flying in a little airplane and you're following a bigger airplane because they can roll you upside down. Now, if you're flying at 2,000 feet and you get caught in a wake turbulence and do an inadvertent roll, it scares the daylights out of you. But at 50 feet above the ground on short final, it can ruin your whole doggone day. So the important thing to know is how these vortices work. First of all, they occur anytime there is lift on the wings. They start when the nose wheel of the airplane leaves the ground, and they stay until the nose wheel returns to the ground. Next, they tend to sink behind the airplane. If you want to avoid the vortices of a big airplane, you would want to fly above the flight path of the aircraft that's generating the wake turbulence. Also, you need to know that when the vortices get near the ground, they tend to spread apart and drift with the wind. And the one condition that requires maximum caution when you're avoiding wake turbulence is a light quartering tailwind. Now here's why. Let's assume that these vortices drift apart at a rate of 5 knots. And let's assume that you have a 5-knot quartering tailwind. Well, you could see what would happen. This upwind vortex would be held right over the runway. The downwind vortex would be blown away, and that's no problem. So when you have a light quartering tailwind, the upwind vortex could be right here over the runway, and that would be your most dangerous situation. So around an airport, watch out for a light quartering tailwind and the effect it might have on wake turbulence. Now, let's assume that you're landing behind a bigger aircraft. What should you do? Well, what you should do is fly above the landing aircraft's flight path. Because the vortices are generated right here, they sink below the aircraft's flight path, and you want to land beyond the point where his nose wheel touches the ground, because lift is on his wings until his nose wheel touches the ground. So when you're landing behind a bigger aircraft, you should avoid wake turbulence by staying above the bigger aircraft's flight path and landing beyond the aircraft's touchdown point. Now, let's assume that you are departing behind a bigger aircraft. Let's take a look at what you do here. As soon as that big aircraft's nose wheel leaves the ground, his vortices begin, and they drift behind the aircraft and descend. So when you're departing behind a bigger aircraft, you should avoid wake turbulence by maneuvering the aircraft above and upwind of the bigger aircraft. So if you were in a Skyhawk, you'd like to outclimb this 737. Well, there's no way you'd outclimb the 737. So you would want to avoid his flight path by turning away. And now, when you're in the company of much larger aircraft, you'll know what to do about their wake turbulence.